The great hall of the Galactic Exposition Center buzzed with the usual din of elite races from every corner of the universe, each mingling, trading, and boasting of their superior technologies and ancient bloodlines. The air was thick with the scent of exotic spices and, above all, the subtle undercurrent of power that only those with centuries of history could command. But there was one stall that drew no attention. A corner booth where only the most impatient of the wealthy dared to glance. Inside the small cage were 3 dragon hatchlings, Flawed, imperfect creatures who had been rejected by every buyer who passed by. Their scales were patchy, their wings too small, and their eyes glimmered with a tired sadness that seemed too human for the proud beasts they were meant to become. They were supposed to be symbols of power, of status, but instead, they had become burdens no one cared to carry. Elizabeth, a human with sharp eyes and a quiet determination, had watched the scene unfold for hours. She wasn't interested in the shiny jewels or the rare relics being traded elsewhere. No, her attention was fixed on the creatures in the corner. She had heard the murmurs of the other bidders as they turned away, disgusted by the dragon's flaws. They weren't perfect. Not worth the price they commanded, but Elizabeth knew something they didn't. She knew the worth of a creature who had been abandoned and cast aside. Her eyes lingered on the hatchlings, and something inside her stirred a deep primal empathy. Dragons, even flawed ones, held a power that many could never understand. She glanced at Evan, her partner, standing beside her. His brow furrowed as he observed the creatures too. The tall, broad-shouldered man didn't speak immediately. Instead, he watched Elizabeth, his expression unreadable. "You're thinking of buying them, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low but tinged with an odd mix of amusement and concern. Elizabeth hesitated, her gaze never leaving the hatchlings. "They've been rejected." "These aren't ordinary creatures, Evan. I don't think I can just walk away from them." Evan let out a small sigh. "They're flawed, Elizabeth. Look at them. They're not going to be useful to anyone." He frowned. "This isn't some kind of charity." "You're not a dragon sanctuary." Her gaze softened as she knelt beside the cage, her fingers brushing against the bars. The smallest hatchling, a dark, mottled thing with deep red eyes, looked up at her, its small wings twitching as though reaching for her. "I don't think you understand," she whispered. More to herself than to Evan. "They might be flawed, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve a chance." The auctioneer's voice echoed through the hall, announcing the next item. Elizabeth took a deep breath and stood up, her decision clear. "I'll take them." Evan blinked in surprise. "What? Are you serious?" Before she could respond, the auctioneer's assistant approached them, the disdain in her eyes unmistakable. "These dragons are damaged goods, human. You're aware of that, aren't you?" she asked, her voice dripping with superiority. Elizabeth's expression remained steadfast. "I don't care. I'll take them." "What's the price?" The assistant blinked, clearly thrown off by Elizabeth's confidence. "You do realize that no one's been willing to pay for them?" "They're not worth much," she said, but there was a hesitation in her voice, as if unsure of how to proceed with a buyer who didn't seem to care about the status of the dragons. "Name your price," Elizabeth repeated. This time her tone leaving no room for argument. The assistant hesitated, looking between Elizabeth and Evan, then, as though seeing an opportunity for an easy sale, she threw out a ridiculously low number that reflected the dragon's so-called worth. It was an insult to most buyers, but Elizabeth didn't flinch. She handed over the currency without hesitation, sealing the deal. The assistant scoffed but said nothing more as she unlocked the cage, allowing Elizabeth to carefully lift each hatchling. They were light but warm, their hearts beating in erratic rhythms, as though struggling to find their place in the universe. Once the transaction was complete, Elizabeth turned to Evan, her eyes shining with a mixture of determination and compassion. "They're coming with us? We'll give them a chance." Evan watched her for a long moment, his thoughts clearly in conflict. "You know what this means, right?" he said finally, his voice softer now. "These dragons, they'll be with us forever. They won't fit into the normal world. We'll have to teach them how to survive. Elizabeth nodded. I know, but we can do it. I know we can. As they walked away from the stall, the other buyers watched them in silence, some with amusement, others with pity. No one understood why Elizabeth had taken the flawed hatchlings, but she didn't care. She didn't need their approval. Over the next few weeks, Elizabeth and Evan dedicated themselves to the care of the dragons. Each hatchling had a distinct personality. One was stubborn, another was playful, and the last was gentle, always watching from the shadows. As they grew stronger, they began to exhibit traits no one had expected. The one who had been considered too small for flight began soaring through the air with elegance. The one who had been deemed too weak developed a ferocity that could only be matched by the most powerful dragons in the galaxy. In time, the humans began to realize what the elite buyers had missed. These dragons were not flawed. They were just different. And in the hands of someone who cared for them, they could become something greater than anyone had imagined. One evening, as Elizabeth and Evan stood on the balcony of their small cabin, watching the hatchlings play in the distance, Evan turned to her, a soft smile tugging at his lips. You were right, he said quietly. They're not flawed. They're perfect. Elizabeth's smile was gentle as she looked out at the three dragons, now fully grown, their wings beating the air with confidence. I always knew they were.